Thank you all for your attendance today. I know this is something that's kind of new. Be patient with us as we work through some of the kinks, but I want to thank everybody for their attendance today. So I am Margaret Herrera. I'm the Transportation Safety Program Manager with the Maricopa Association of Governments. We have been hosting these for quite a few years now. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Maylin Pankiewicz. She's from the city of Phoenix, and she's going to provide an announcement in Spanish. Go ahead, Maylin.
Muchas gracias por atender este evento y toda la información que presentemos hoy en inglés en este taller online también la vamos a tener en español en la misma página de internet. Muchas gracias.
Great, thank you, Maylin. And again, thank you to all who are able to participate in today's webinar. So our community and the nation as well have faced some very challenging times this year. We look forward to a time when it's safe to be together in the same room again, but due to the risk to the public of health caused by possible spread of the COVID-19 virus to public gatherings, the Maricopa Association of Governments has determined that the meetings and events will indefinitely be held through technological means, such as this webinar. We are confident that as a community, we can work together to slow the spread while maintaining resources we provide. In anticipation of a time when schools are back in session, we're excited to be able to provide this training in this virtual format. A recording, including Spanish language version of this webinar, will be available after the event. This is our 16th year hosting the Crossing Guard trainings, as I mentioned before. The city of Phoenix has been holding Crossing Guard trainings for much longer than that. Obviously, this is our first year using this format. The content, though, is developed in partnership with a number of cities in the Phoenix metro area. We hope this will provide a flexible and accessible means for training crossing guards now as well as throughout the year. Staff at all the agencies that you see listed here made this workshop possible. I would like agency staff at this time to indicate the city they represent in the chat box so that attendees know who is available for questions. I'll leave a few seconds for you to do that. Attending guards, you can note those in the chat box as they pop up. So a little bit about MAG. What is MAG? As the slide mentions, we are an association made up of all cities, towns, as well as 3 Native American communities in the Phoenix metropolitan area. This also includes Maricopa County and parts of Pinal County. MAG is responsible for regional planning in many areas. 2 key areas, though, are transportation, that would be freeway planning, light road planning, and buses. And the second key area is clean air. So in our role as a regional planning agency for the Phoenix metropolitan region, we are working with all cities and towns and counties in our planning region to improve road safety. One of those key initiatives is improving road safety on access routes to schools and has been identified as a regional priority. This workshop and the materials provide basic education and training to school crossing guards, thus making a basic but essential step that crossing guards do not compromise their own safety nor that of the children while they're performing their duties. We hope you all enjoy this workshop and gain much from this experience as you prepare for the eventual start of a new school year. And that would be based on the state and district guidance. I would like to thank you for your valuable service you provide and wish each of you a safe and healthy year ahead as you perform your duties as crossing guards. So before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to go over some virtual workshop housekeeping items. We have compressed this into a 2-hour training, and such questions via chat box can be entered after each segment or really any time throughout the training. However, it probably would be good after each segment if we open that chat box up. Please keep your questions in a very general context and brief so that others can have the opportunity to ask questions. There will be no break provided, but feel free to get up and stretch and take a break in the place that you're in, remembering that you'll have the ability to access the recorded version after the event. You'll be provided an email address to send your virtual sign-in at the end of the webinar. The 4 key items that we have information from you is first, your first and last name, the school, your district, as well as the city and town your school resides. It is also crucial that you provide these 4 items with the words CG sign in the subject line of your email. This is for us to verify your attendance with your district administrators and have the ability to forward questions specific to your crossing if you have them to the appropriate local agency staff. Also, feel free to leave any feedback, comments, or questions on the workshop itself or specific content in the body of your email sign-in. Also, we have a brief poll that will be administered in the webinar platform at the end of the training. And I'd also like to mention that the handbook that we typically hand out at the in-person trainings is also available for viewing or download at the webpage URL that you see here below. So with that, I'm going to introduce Kyle Lane. He's from the City of Peoria Fire Department, and he's going to walk us through some health and welfare key items.
Thank you very much. Good to be with all of you. I'm glad that we can spend this time together. And just real quick, we want to go over some health and safety things for you guys as you're out there. So we're going to talk about the health and safety regarding heat-related illness. And we want to talk a little bit about your calling. If you had to call 911, what's going to happen there? So
hold on
ready?
There.
There we go. So we want to be cool and beat the heat. All right, so if you had to activate an emergency medical services or the fire department and you had to call 911 in an emergency, here's just some quick helpful tips for you. First, we'd ask that you stay calm, right? It's very hard for the operator to hear you if you're panicking. And so take a deep breath and just stay calm. And the questions they're going to ask you are, what is your emergency and what's your location? You should note that the call first comes to the police department when you call 911. Then it is transferred to the fire medical department. And so in that, there's going to be several people asking you what your location is. Please remember that the help is already on the way, but they want to really make sure they have the right location. Particularly as a crossing guard, you're going to have to give the intersection you're at, or if you're in the between intersections, you're going to have to be really specific about where your emergency's at. And so they're going to push on that, and then they're going to ask you what the emergency is, about how old the patient is the patient breathing, and they're going to give you some instructions as to what you can do to help the patient based on the information you give. They're also going to ask you your name and phone number, and they're going to ask your phone number in case you get disconnected so that they could call you back. And then, of course, you're going to want to request help from the school office, however you do that, either by radio or phone. Next slide, please. When we're talking about being out helping the kiddos cross the street, we're talking about personal protection. And personal protection, we're going to talk about our health and safety in a minute. But as far as if you encountered an emergency where you had to help a child or someone else, you want to use personal protective equipment, right? And so basically we think about things like gloves, latex gloves, not really latex anymore, but those protective medical gloves. And then especially with kind of illnesses rolling around, maybe a mask or perhaps safety glasses or something like that. We really want to emphasize those scene safety. That is you being safe, right? If a kid falls in the street, we don't want to be out in the middle of the street trying to help them with their their cut or their scrape or something. We want to get them out of the street into a place where you're safe. And so keep that in mind. We don't want to become victims ourselves. Anybody know how hot it is today? Like 100 million degrees probably outside, and it's not going to get cool anytime soon, right? And so we want to talk about heat-related illness, okay? we've spent a lot of time probably this summer inside, especially with the pandemic going on. And so we probably have spent all that time in the AC and we may not be used to the heat. So you need to be aware of heat-related illness. And one of the first things we find with heat-related illness are heat cramps, right? You may have had these before. That's when you get that muscle spasm or pain. It's usually in the legs, but it can be in the arms or even in your stomach, right? And the way we prevent heat cramps is the same way we prevent most heat-related illness, and that's we stay in a cool spot, right? And we drink a lot of water, a lot of clear liquids. Sports beverages are mentioned on here. Sports beverages contain electrolytes. And basically think of that as salt. And so they have a lot of sugar in them because you wouldn't drink salt water, right? So we want to reduce the amount of sugar we're intaking. So if you're going to use a sports beverage, dilute that down with a lot of water. And then if you have cramps that last longer than an hour, you're going to want to get medical help. Heat exhaustion is related to heat cramps, right? It's probably the next stage though. And that's when we have this heavy sweating and we're getting pale and we're feeling weak and tired and related to the heat, right? And when we have heat exhaustion, it also might have weakness or a headache and nausea and vomiting. If we get to nausea and vomiting, we're pushing on to the next stage, which we're going to talk about, but that's something that you'd want to seek medical help for, right? And so, and as well as fainting. Anytime someone loses consciousness, we want to make sure that we call 911. To prevent heat exhaustion and really heat cramps, any heat-related illness, we want to wear lightweight clothing, okay? And we want to wear long sleeves if we can. We want to protect as much of our skin as possible. That helps with the cooling. And then a wide brim hat is useful, right? If you have a ball cap, that's fine. But really that wide brim hat is super useful in keeping us cool because it provides that shade for us, right? And when we're feeling overwhelmed with the heat, we need to drink lots of cool non-alcoholic beverages, okay? Probably not even super ice cold, but more of a, not hot, but a room temperature type beverage will absorb quicker, right? We want to rest in a shaded area. If we can, we'll try to get to the air conditioning. You know, that's may not be possible, but just even getting to the shade, it's significantly cooler to have the sun off of us. And then if you have to, you want to take a cool shower, a bath, sponge bath, but you can also take a rag, right? If you can't get into a shower, and you can get it wet and then put it around your neck or wipe under your armpits, okay, over your head. Those kind of things to increase that evaporation, which is what sweating is doing, right, to cool us down. And then we want to rest. Heat stroke is the final stage of heat-related illness, and that's a medical emergency, okay? You're going to definitely call 911 for heat stroke. The main thing we'd emphasize with heat stroke is red skin that's hot and dry. If it's 112 out, someone's been in the sun working and you touch their skin and it's dry, they're in trouble, okay? So they may have a throbbing headache, they might be dizzy, they might be throwing up. Again, if someone's unconscious, we're going to call 911 for sure. But that dry skin, that means that they've run out of the body's cooling mechanism and we have to help them, okay? So we need to get the paramedics there, get an IV started. So if you think someone's having heat stroke or even severe heat exhaustion, right, go ahead and call 911 and take that victim and get them to a shady area, right? You might run into some kids maybe in the afternoon who aren't looking so hot. Get them to a shady area where we reduce that outside temperature, okay? And then we're going to try to cool them down. Get a wet towel, put it around the neck again, under the armpits if we can, okay? Ice packs are great if you have them. You may not have them, but again, we want to do clear liquids, preferably water. Urine, most people may not know, but urine is a great indicator of how hydrated you are, okay? So when we talk about looking at our urine, clear urine means you're hydrated, right? You're pushing out mainly water, and so you have extra water in your body, and so that's great. When we start getting colored urine, then we start getting into areas where we're short of fluids. So you can see on the screen here, the darker that urine gets, the worse off we are, okay? Even light yellow means we're behind, okay? So we want to drink more water. Your urine really should be clear in most cases, okay? So If you're getting into the bright yellow orange area, then you are definitely behind the 8 ball on your fluid intake. So we want to drink lots of fluids and get that urine back to clear. Here in Arizona, where we all live, right, we need to be drinking constantly. Even when we don't feel like we're thirsty, especially during the summer, we need to keep pushing that fluid through because we're losing a lot of fluid. Sun exposure is a big issue, of course. Here we get to have the sun out most of the time, but it also causes some problems, right? And you can see on the screen there that exposure to the sun can cause premature aging, cataracts, and skin cancer. And so we want to reduce sun exposure. And so we want to talk about that here real quick. Who's at higher risk for sun damage? You can see here people who go out unprotected or have excessive exposure, right? You have a lot of exposure working outside, okay? And if you don't wear sunscreen or you don't protect yourself, then you're at higher risk. People with fair complexion, blue eyes, you can see it there, family history. Or if you've had a lot of sunburns in your early life, you're at higher risk for skin-related issues. So we want to be safe. I'm going to use this little acronym, SAFE. First, shirt and arms, SA. We want to wear loose-fitting clothing, okay? And long sleeve shirts and long pants are preferable. I know we like to wear shorts and a t-shirt, but in fact, being out in the sun, you're going to be cooler, especially if you're working, crossing, if you wear long sleeve shirts and long pants, okay? And then tightly woven fabric. We want to wear things like cotton type things. And then the F in safe is for face, right? We want to protect especially our face because that's a hard one to keep covered up, right? I know we're wearing masks a lot now, but even with that, we still have a lot of our face exposed. So a hat provides a nice shade, especially that wide brim hat to keep it off your neck. And then you want to use sunscreen with UV protection, A and B. And then at least SPF of 15, I'd say higher. Okay, 15 would be the bare minimum we'd want to use. We want to use something much higher than that. Get up in the 30 to 50 range for sure. And you're going to put on generous amounts and you want to reapply it frequently. Okay, that sunscreen isn't going to last all day. So we put it on before we go out, but maybe we put it on when we have a little break when we're crossing, and then we're going to put it on for our afternoon shift as well. And then, of course, it's for everyone, right? Kids, adults, but especially if we're going to be out in the sun, right? It's a good practice every day to just put on sunscreen if you know you're going to be outside and you're going to be going out. So shirt to protect your arms, just, you know, not a short sleeve, we want long sleeve, and then we want to protect our face, and then everybody needs to do this. All right, so some quick reminders here, and then we'll get to why you came, you know, learning about that crossing. Take care of yourself. We want to prevent heat-related illness by drinking lots of water. Keep drinking, you know, even if you're not thirsty, be sipping on water, keeping that water up in your body. Be aware of those signs and symptoms. If you start feeling ill, take a break, get some help, and then know what to do if you actually are suffering some heat-related illness, right? And if you have to, don't be afraid to call 911 if you're getting sick, you're vomiting, you're feeling dizzy, losing consciousness, those sorts of things. So again, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry we can't be in person, but I'm always excited to be invited to participate. So have a great year. Be safe.
Thanks, Kyle. Looks like we had a couple people raise their hands, and we have some monitors looking at the chat. So if there are any questions right now that we want to address.
Margaret, this is Brandon. One thing I want to note here is if anyone does have a question, if you could type it in the Q&A box instead of the chat box, since those are kind of flying by kind of rapidly and harder to go through. So if anyone does have a question, you type them in the Q&A area, we'll respond to them, or at least review them and maybe follow up later if we can't respond to them during the session.
Okay, that's a good note. It's easier for us to monitor and address the questions if they're in the Q&A. So if you could type them in the Q&A instead. And that's my fault. I actually did direct everybody to use the chat box. So
reviewing even the chat box, I don't know if I'm I don't know if I'm missing it. I'm not seeing any questions in there. I guess I have a question, and in the meantime, if we're waiting for any questions to come in for Kyle. Kyle, I've seen some sunscreen SPF 80, SPF, I mean, I don't know if it's up to SPF 100 or 200 or 500. Does that higher number help you? Does that protect you longer? Can you address that? Are you really getting better protection? Can you put it on and go out in the sun for 24 hours straight without getting so much as a light tan, or how does that work?
No, you're going to still have to reapply no matter what the SPF number is, okay? The SPF number is an indication of how much protection that's giving you while it's on your skin. But once you pass around 50, getting up into 60, 70 range, yes, it's more protection. You end up, though, probably paying a little more, and then it's a negligible effect, right? So the more, it's not all the same, right? 15 to 60 SPF is a huge jump, whereas 60 to 70 is a really minor jump. So 50 is probably a good range to shoot for, 50 to 60, but you're still going to have to reapply it. Even the ones that, there might be some that say they're longer lasting, we'd still recommend you just keep reapplying it, right? And this is a good time to mention the spray sunscreen. When you spray it on, you still need to rub it in, okay? Just spraying it on the surface isn't sufficient. You still have to rub that in. I'm happy to leave my email address too if anybody has any questions. Brandon, Margaret, and I'll put it in the chat, but also if you want to send it out whenever you send out your stuff.
All right. Great. Do we have any questions that came up either to the Q&A or any that we were able to catch in the chat? I noted that there's a lot of people that are inputting their name, those 4 items that I mentioned. However, that information we don't need now. We need it in an email after the event. So we'll kind of go over that again at the end of the event. And again, if you have any questions for Kyle regarding health and welfare, if you want to put that into the Q&A, otherwise we'll move on to the next. We'll move on to the next segment.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay.
I almost explained everything perfectly.
I see another raised hand.
Yeah, I think Craig, if I'm thinking correctly, the raised hand, I don't know that they would be able to say anything because their speakers are not activated. Is that accurate?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so instead of raising your hand, if you could put the question in the Q&A, that would be very helpful. So with that, let's see, we do have one in the Q&A right now. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Guardians of the Future video. And we have Don Cross from the city of Phoenix and Brandon Foria from the city of Peoria that are going to provide some additional information after each chapter in the video. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to that video. Okay, just give me a second here. All right, here we go.
We're not seeing video, Margaret.
All right. How about now?
Yes, I see the title credits.
first step in becoming a crossing guard is to understand your basic equipment. In this chapter, you will learn about the obvious and not so obvious items required to perform your duties as a crossing guard. Basic crossing guard equipment would include your bright yellow vest, your stop paddle, and the portable signs that go out into the roadway at your crossing location. Make sure you always wear your safety vest when working, and make sure it is bright and clean. Not only is the vest mandatory, it is the single most important item that allows you to be seen by drivers. Your safety vest is bright orange or fluorescent yellow-green. Besides making you more visible to drivers, it establishes your authority over the crosswalks. Always wear your vest over your jacket or raincoat. The next most important item to get the attention of drivers is your stop paddle. Keep the stop paddle clean and in good condition. If it gets faded or damaged, get a replacement from your school or school district. Other vital components of your crossing guard toolkit are the portable signs, which are also provided by your school district. We'll discuss the proper placement of these signs in a later chapter. An area often overlooked by crossing guards is health and safety. The hot sun, dehydration, and high volume traffic areas are just some of the issues that Arizona crossing guards face. There are materials you can use to protect yourself. Let's begin with protection from the sun. Wearing a bright orange or yellow-green hat will protect your head and face from the sun and keep you more visible. Keeping water with you at your crossing location will help prevent dehydration. In case of emergency, it is important to have a two-way radio or cell phone with you. This will allow you to contact the school office, 911, or report suspicious activities if needed. If you do have a cell phone, remember that it may only be used in an emergency. The health and welfare of the children and families you cross every day is another important part of your job as a crossing guard. You are often the front line for the school when a child is sick or hurt at the crosswalk. You are also able to observe if any of your children or their family members are having hydration issues.
All right, do we have any questions? I guess, Don, if you wanted to chime in here, and then if we have any questions.
Yeah, so in this chapter, the important takeaways are the importance of your equipment. Having a vest is vital. You need to be seen when you're out on the roadway. Your stop paddle should be in good condition. If you need a new one in the city of Phoenix, we replace them. In other cities, it's another process. Your school district more than likely replaces it. Having your water with you is important, especially in the summer months and the beginning of the school year. And also having your radio or your phone to contact people in case of emergency or if anything else comes up. Those are all important things that you need to remember and have with you. Brandon, did you have anything else?
Yeah, Norma Quintero had raised her hand. So if you have a question, don't use the raise hand function. Just type it in the Q&A box, and we'll see if we can get to that. So if you can type that question in there, we can. If you can get it in quickly, we can answer it now. Or if you want to type it in, we can address it after the next segment of the video. So just a reminder to everyone, use that Q&A box for any questions you have.
All right, so Margaret, I think we can move on to chapter 2.
All right, thank you.
The yellow crosswalk is your domain. It's up to you to make sure that children use it safely. In this chapter, you will learn how to set up and operate the yellow crosswalk. Yellow crosswalks have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit as mandated by state law. That speed limit is only in effect when the portable signs are in the roadway. The lower speed limit begins at the first 15-mile-per-hour sign on approach to the crosswalk. It ends once the motorists pass the crosswalk, where they are permitted to resume driving at the normal posted speed. Passing another vehicle in a 15-mile-per-hour school zone is strictly prohibited by law. Permanent school Pentagon signs are installed by the local agency in advance of all school crosswalks to warn motorists of upcoming school crossings. It is your job to place the portable signs in the street at your 15-mile-per-hour school crossing. You need to get these signs in the street in the proper sequence, usually 45 minutes before school starts. To help you, there may be yellow dots painted on the street to show you exactly where to place your signs. The first sign to be installed is the no passing 15-mile-per-hour school in session sign. Place it on the yellow dot that is located in advance of the crosswalk. Next, you will place another no passing 15-mile-per-hour school in session sign in advance of the crosswalk for the opposite directions of traffic. On some busier streets, you may have more than one 15-mile-per-hour portable sign to position on approaches to the crosswalk. It's important to let drivers know they are approaching a 15-mile-per-hour school crossing before they near the yellow crosswalk. So all of the portable 15-mile-per-hour signs must be placed where they belong before you position the Stop for Children in Crosswalk signs. These signs get placed on the center line of the street right at the crosswalk so they can be seen easily by motorists coming from both directions. For wider, busier streets, you may have more than one of these signs for each approach. It is very important that all of your signs are in place and clearly visible to oncoming traffic. If you have questions about sign placement or if you need a new sign, please contact the school principal.
Once the students have finished crossing, the signs need to be removed no later than 30 minutes after the final class has been dismissed. You do this in precisely the reverse order from which you put the signs out.
First, remove the Stop When Children in Crosswalk sign. Then remove one of the 15-mile-per-hour school in session signs, then the other, until all the signs have been removed from the street. Be sure to store your signs in a secure and safe place off the street or in the schoolyard. Signs shall not block the sidewalk, and turn them away from the street so that drivers are not confused by seeing them when the 15-mile-per-hour speed limit is not in effect. If a school crossing is located directly adjacent to the school, the portable signs may be allowed to stay up for the entire school day. A signed agreement must exist between the school district and the local authority to allow for this. But if the crosswalk is not adjacent to a school, the signs must be removed before you leave your area or go off duty. Sometimes this means the signs have to be placed and removed several times a day. Doing so encourages motorists to be more willing to comply with the 15-mile-per-hour speed limits when needed. If this is a situation at your school crossing, make sure you place and remove the portable signs in the correct sequence each time you do it. Before we move on, there is one critical point we need to make. The signs do not automatically protect you from motorists. This is why it is required to wear your bright reflective vest. Your vest and hat make you more visible to drivers. Wait for appropriate gaps in traffic before you attempt to place your signs. If necessary, get someone from the school, such as a maintenance worker, to help you by observing traffic and advising you of potentially dangerous situations. Ask your school's principal to assign help if you need assistance. Once your signs are in place, your next major responsibility is to work with the children. You need to establish your authority as the person running the crosswalk right at the beginning of the school year. Of course, you want the children to like you, but it is more important that they respect you, take direction from you, and learn from you. Make sure they don't arrive at school too early. Confirm with your school the appropriate time for their arrival. Work with your principal to define safe places for the children to wait if they arrive early. It is important that you cross the children in groups, not individually. Make sure there is a safe gap in traffic before you step out into the street. Make eye contact with the drivers to make sure that they see you. Once you are sure all oncoming drivers see you from both directions, walk to the middle of the crosswalk with your stop paddle held high. Instruct the children to look left, right, and left again before entering the street. Tell the children to walk quickly across the street. Don't let them play, run or ride bikes or scooters, or use wheel shoes in the crosswalk. And keep your eye on traffic the entire time you occupy the crosswalk. Keep your paddle high even after the children are safe on the other side of the street until you step up on the curb and are out of harm's way. Teach the children the proper way to cross the street by doing it the right way yourself. Stop before entering the street, look left, then right, then left again, waiting for a safe gap in traffic. Making eye contact with the drivers is a key ingredient to safety. Make sure that drivers are paying attention to you and really see you. Remember, your responsibility is to see to it that the children arrive safely at school. If you feel that you need additional help to get the job done properly, speak to your school principal and get some help. So let's review. Always arrive at your crosswalk about an hour before school starts. Begin placing your portable signs 45 minutes before school starts. Put out the no passing 15-mile-per-hour school zone signs first on the yellow dots in advance of the crosswalk. First on approach to the crosswalk and then the other. Place the stop for children in crosswalk signs last on the center line right at the crosswalk. Group the children away from the curb or roadway and wait for a safe gap before stepping into the crosswalk. Make sure you make eye contact with the drivers and don't just look at the cars. Make sure the driver really sees you. No matter who you are or what you're doing, there will always be motorists who will not stop for you. Make sure the children walk across the street quickly and without fooling around. Running, playing, riding bicycles, scooters, or wheeled shoes are not permitted. Maintain your position in the center of the crosswalk and signal the children to cross. Keep your stop paddle high above your head even after the children are across the street until you have returned to the curb. Now you are protecting yourself. Don't ever let a student do your job for you. And this is very important. Don't direct traffic. The motorists will automatically move forward when you are out of the street. Your stop paddle is lowered and it is safe for them to proceed. You are not a member of the police force. Only a trained and sworn police officer can direct traffic. It is not your job to stop speeders or drivers that are passing other cars. Your job is to protect the safety of the children and yourself, period. You can report any traffic concerns to the city's street transportation department through your principal.
All right, I think either Don or Brandon might want to make a comment before we take questions.
Yeah, so in this chapter, we focus mainly on the yellow crosswalk, and you have to remember the setup is different in the morning than it is in the afternoon. In the morning, you put out the 15-mile-an-hour portables first, followed by the stop when children at the crosswalk. And the reason you do that is because you want to slow down traffic as quickly as you can. It's safer for you being in the roadway for sure. In the afternoon, it's the opposite. So you would take out the stop when children portable first, and then the 15-mile-an-hours would come out after to have the drivers maintain that 15-mile-an-hour speed as much as possible. Brandon, did you have something else?
Yeah, Don, that's a great point that we don't really address that in the video. Why you put the signs out there in the order, so it's great that you said that. And I guess to drive it home, I can have a little bit of a personal story. I recall driving on 19th Avenue a number of years ago, going the speed limit, of course, 40 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden I saw this stop when children in crosswalk portable sign in the street at one of the schools in Phoenix. And I slammed on my brakes and I thought, am I speeding through a 15 zone? That would be the worst thing possible. I can only imagine me getting pulled over by a police officer for speeding in a zone. I would never be able to live it down.
Nope.
And I kind of slammed on the brakes. Fortunately, there was no one close behind me. And then I kind of I was looking around, assessed the situation, and realized, oh, that 15-mile-an-hour portable sign was the only one out, and the crossing guard was just putting the signs in the street. And so that can be a shock because some of these streets can be up to 45 miles an hour. And if people are driving, all of a sudden they see it says stop when children in crosswalk. It could be like me where you think, am I speeding in a 15 zone? And it could potentially cause a crash, cause a lot of confusion. So that's why you want those 15-mile-an-hour portable signs out first. And then at the end of the day, the last thing's out. We don't want that situation where you're driving the normal speed and all of a sudden you see that sign there and it sends mixed signals. So I just wanted to add that.
And I understand why guards want to do that because they want to do, put the signs out sequentially. But, even though it's a little harder to set up the signs separately, putting the one set up first and then the other, it's better for your safety.
Well, there's a plus to it too, Don, because if you have to walk to one end and then back to the other, and then you get more steps in. And so
And
are
more
people still
exercise.
tracking steps anymore? So I have a step goal right now since I'm pretty much a shut-in like most of us are.
That's
So I
right.
find myself doing paces and circles in my house. But I mean, if you can get more steps, that's a good thing, right?
Yep, of course.
So.
All right, any questions? Doesn't look like it. So I guess we're ready for chapter 3, Margaret.
All right, we'll move on. I'm going to advance manually here for a second. Okay, here we go.
Another type of crosswalk you will encounter as a crossing guard is a white crosswalk. In this chapter, you will learn how to operate white crosswalks at four-way stop locations, two-way stop locations, and other variations of the two. Under state law, white crosswalks have different rules and regulations than yellow crosswalks. Schools are not required to provide a crossing guard at these locations. The decision to place a trained crossing guard at a white crossing would be up to the school. The location and length of time for the crossing guard to be at these locations would be determined by individual schools and their hours of operation. Your role in a white crosswalk is to provide assistance to school children crossing the location during school operation hours. This does not change the importance and vital role the crossing guard plays at these locations. The basics are still the same. You need your reflective vest, a stop paddle, a bright yellow or orange hat, water, cell phone or radio, and sunscreen to keep yourself visible and hydrated at your crossing location. Where you will notice the biggest change is in the setup of the crosswalk. White crosswalks are not allowed by state law to operate in combination with 15 mile per hour or stop when children in crosswalk portable signs. Not having to handle the portable signs allows the crossing guard at a white crosswalk to concentrate on the most important part of the job, crossing children safely. Let's discuss the types of intersections that have white crosswalks. One such location is a four-way stop intersection. These areas have white crosswalks on all four sides of the intersection to match the stop signs. These locations can be operated with either one or two crossing guards. We will discuss both options. If you are one crossing guard operating the four-way stop, it is very important to choose the right side to stand on to greet the children. This is especially important in the morning at arrival. You will need to stand across from the school where the most children cross. At the beginning of the school year, you may not be sure exactly where that is. It will only take a day or two to find out. How many children cross and when they cross can change over the school year as well. Stay in contact with your school principal for any changes to the crossing patterns. As one crossing guard at a four-way stop, you can cross up to 3 sides of the street to get children to school. It is vital that you are in control of the crosswalk and that you understand how to facilitate crossing at each corner. If you need to cross 3 corners, you will start with the corner you are on, then follow a U pattern until you are on the other corner of the school. If you have 2 corners to cross, you will cross the students in an L pattern. You will hold the kids at your starting corner while you cross the children from the opposite corner to you. Once you and the children have come out of the street and returned to your starting corner, you will then cross the group in the closest crosswalk to the school to complete the pattern. The crossing patterns are much easier with a second crossing guard. Heavy pedestrian and vehicle traffic at 4-way intersections often require the schools to consider hiring a second crossing guard. They can be extremely helpful to maintain a safe crossing area in this situation. In a 2 crossing guard situation, each guard will be responsible for 2 corners. Communication between the 2 guards is crucial to the success of the crossing and safety of the children. A more common type of crosswalk location is a 2-way stop intersection. White crosswalks can be painted on 2 or 3 sides of the intersection or placed next to a yellow crosswalk. The challenge of operating the white crosswalk at a 2-way stop location is looking out for the direction of traffic without stop control. If you have 2 corners to cross, you will cross the students in an L pattern. You will hold the kids at your starting corner while you cross the children from the opposite corner to you. Once you and the children have come out of the street and returned to your starting corner, you will then cross a group in the closest crosswalk to the school to complete the pattern. Some white crosswalks at 2-way stop locations have a yellow crosswalk next to them. This is a different type of crossing challenge. You will be required to set up the portable signs for the yellow crosswalk and operate the crosswalk along with the white crosswalks. The yellow crosswalks will be on the side without a stop sign. To cross students, you will need to use the L pattern or the U pattern. So let's review. Always remember to wear your bright reflective vest and bright hat. Have a clean stop paddle, water, sunscreen, and a two-way radio or cell phone. Find the corner where the majority of your children need to cross, especially for morning arrival. When operating a white crosswalk at a two-way or a four-way stop location, remember to use the L or U crossing pattern, depending on the amount of crosswalks at the intersection. Whether you are crossing children in a white or yellow crosswalk, you serve a vital role in the lives of the children you cross. They look to you to protect their safety and ensure that they arrive at school in good health and ready to learn.
All right, end of chapter 3. Don, what do you got for us?
All right, so in chapter 3, we look at white crosswalks at either two-way stops or four-way stops. The biggest thing that I like to think about in this chapter is crossing guards looking for the corner they should be stationed at to either start the day or end the day. You have to be aware of where your students are coming from. So there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It just depends on the traffic of your pedestrians. So once you've nailed down that corner, then you kind of stay aware of the intersection and see if anything changes, and you can change as your demographics change. Brandon, did you have anything else?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add is in the video, there's a point where you can see me standing on the corner. Yes, obviously Don and I were posing as crossing guards. You can see me standing on the corner, and a child starts to cross as I'm crossing, and it looks like I kind of say stop for no reason, then they say, okay, you can go now. What we were trying to do is show that the crossing guard should not let the students cross until they've deemed it safe for the kids to start crossing, and but not before then. So you get out there first, make sure it's safe, then you call the kids to cross. You don't let them cross right before, right as you're crossing. We actually had some cases in years past where unfortunately there were crashes involving red light runners, and the problem was that the guard was getting out and didn't establish that it was safe for the students, but they just learned, hey, it says walk, we're just gonna go. So just to stress that you as the crossing guard are telling them when it's appropriate to cross, and get them trained to do that. And then hopefully it doesn't take too much work to get them to do that for the future.
Yeah, it's important to take control of your crossing and your intersection. You want the people that cross with you to know that you're in charge, and that you're gonna let them know once you've planted yourself in the roadway when it's proper to come out and cross. All right, I guess
I don't see any questions, so I think we're ready to move on to the next chapter.
Chapter 4.
All right, chapter 4.
Signalized intersections often carry heavier volumes of traffic traveling at higher speeds. This traffic, mixed with pedestrians, can be challenging. In this chapter, you will learn how to operate white crosswalks at these locations and how best to keep yourself and the children you cross safe. Crosswalks are typically painted on all sides of the intersection. Crossing duties can be performed by either 1 or 2 guards, depending on the amount of traffic volume at your location. There are benefits to employing 2 guards instead of 1, which we will discuss later in the chapter. Your basic crossing equipment is even more crucial when you are a crossing guard at a signal. Drivers are often traveling at higher speeds, so the importance of being visible cannot be overstated. Some signalized intersections have push buttons that control the walk, don't walk light and the walk cycle for the intersection. If your signal has a button, you will be able to push it to activate the walk cycle at the intersection. Once you have a group of children ready to cross and you have pushed the button and you receive the walk signal, you should look to make sure the crosswalk is clear. Then raise your stop paddle high so drivers can see it as you enter the street. quickly motion to the children to enter the crosswalk while monitoring the amount of available walk time. If the time has run out on the walk cycle, hold the children at the corner until the next crossing cycle. Never allow children to cross against the signal, and don't ever try to extend the crossing time by staying longer in the street with your stop paddle. Extending the crossing time creates motorist disrespect for the operation of the crosswalk.
Traffic signals are typically programmed to work in sequence with nearby signals. All you have to do is push the walk button once before you cross. Even though the light may not change immediately, it will within a minute or so, and the walk signal will appear. Rushing or trying to anticipate the signal can do more harm than good.
Understanding how to operate the crosswalk while using the pedestrian push button as a guide will help keep you and the children safe. There are 3 different phases that you should be aware of that will help you be a more effective crossing guard at traffic signals. The first is the walk phase. This phase is self-explanatory. It means what it says. It is important to keep your eye on motorists who may run the red light or who might be turning right or left from a side street. This is why you need to make eye contact with the drivers and not just watch the cars. The second phase is when the light turns to don't walk and is flashing. Some jurisdictions have a countdown instead of a flashing hand. The flashing hand or countdown is a warning not to start crossing the street if you haven't already. If you are in the street when the don't walk signal begins, you still have ample time to cross. The third phase is the solid don't walk. The solid don't walk signal means don't cross. Stay out of the street on the sidewalk as far away from the curb as possible until the next walk signal appears. Motorists are not allowed to enter the crosswalk making right or left-hand turns in the portion occupied by the crossing guard. Using a second crossing guard offers more control of the crossing area. 2 guards would position themselves in the same crosswalk at the same time, discouraging traffic from entering the crossing from any direction. So let's review. Staying visible with the basic equipment is the key to your safety and the children you cross. Using the pedestrian push button effectively will assist with creating the necessary gaps in traffic to cross the children. Remember the 3 walk, don't walk phases. Walk on the walk signal, finish crossing, and don't start a new crossing when the don't walk is flashing. And don't cross at all when the don't walk signal is solid and the light is red.
All right, end of chapter 4. Don.
All right. So this chapter is about traffic signals. They're a different beast than working at a stop location or at a school zone. You have to deal with higher speeds, higher volumes of traffic. So it's a lot more of a, there's a lot more peril going into the road in those kind of locations. So it's important that you are aware of your surroundings, that you are making eye contact with those drivers, that your students are listening to you when you say wait and you go on the road and get yourself set and then call them out. You also have the countdowns to worry about. So if you're working with a partner, if you're the first one out and your half of the road is clear, you are able to go and walk back to your corner while your partner still works on the other half of the roadway. And if you don't have enough time, that's something you can work with your jurisdiction to correct. Brandon, do you have anything else?
You hit the main point. Some of the other points about signals I'm going to save until we do the demonstration, so we can look at some more specifics a little bit more later.
Sounds good. Does it look like any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions. I did see a discussion in the chat. Someone asked if there was a video to go with the audio. So if for some reason you're not seeing a video, you just may want to check your configuration or your setup for this Zoom meeting to make sure that you are seeing it. But there should be a video that goes along with the audio you're hearing. You shouldn't just see our faces.
Brandon, I think that may have been before when I didn't have the correct shared screen up.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but I think we got that mitigated now.
Okay, very
Everybody
good.
can see and hear the video. So
Gotcha.
I'm going to manually advance to chapter 5.
It is good to note, though, that we do have these videos available on the website so people can watch them whenever they want.
Correct. Here we go.
Like anything else in life, crossing devices and locations are always changing and evolving. Local government agencies want to make crossing safer to encourage more walking to school. Technology is helping to improve crossing safety. All across Arizona, there are examples of this technology at work. In this chapter, we are going to discuss how these devices affect you, the crossing guard. The first example we will discuss is the HAWK signal, or high-intensity activated crosswalk beacon. It is a pedestrian-activated signal that only is active after the pedestrian pushes the walk button. HAWK signals have white, ladder-style crosswalks and are only installed on high-volume major streets. You will know you are at a HAWK by the unique style signal heads. A crossing guard's first responsibility at one of these locations is to make sure to activate the signal. Once the signal has turned on and traffic has stopped, you would cross children the same way you would at a regular traffic signal. One issue that you have to watch out for are cars that turn into the crosswalk while you are trying to cross the children. The drivers on the opposite side of the HAWK will be at a stop sign and may get impatient as they wait to turn. Your position in the crosswalk will be important in discouraging motorists from turning into the crosswalk area. The HAWK signal will go through 4 phases: flashing yellow, solid red, flashing red, and back to black or off. Phase 1 for the HAWK signal is the flashing yellow phase. The flashing yellow lights are to warn drivers to either slow down to a stop or, if feasible, continue through the intersection before the HAWK signal goes into the second phase, the solid red phase, and pedestrians are allowed to cross. In the solid red phase, drivers in the approach directions of the HAWK signal are required to stop. Cross traffic will have stop signs and will be required to stop as well. Pedestrians from the opposite approach will receive a walk sign from the pedestrian head, encouraging them to cross the street. The third phase is the flashing red phase. This phase is the most confusing to drivers. The law allows drivers to proceed through the HAWK intersection on a flashing red light if their half of the roadway is clear of pedestrians. Drivers will often err on the side of caution and wait until the signal has gone into its final phase. This indecision by drivers will require crossing guards to pay close attention. The fourth and final phase is when the signal heads are black or off. Drivers in the approach directions to the HAWK signal are allowed to proceed, while vehicles and pedestrians in the opposite approach directions are required to stop. Being aware of the phases will enable you to cross children more efficiently. Another type of crossing you may have to work at is a 2-stage crosswalk. The crosswalk is painted in a white ladder style and is typically located on major streets in mid-block locations. This type of crossing allows pedestrians to cross 1/2 the width of roadway at a time. The median islands are designed to force walkers to look at the traffic before they try to enter the roadway. 2 guards are more effective to cross children at these locations. Each guard would be responsible for 1/2 of the street and one direction of traffic. A few crossing locations are now getting stutter flash devices. These are also pedestrian activated and are designed to get the attention of motorists. When they are activated, the light from the device flashes light at the drivers. They can be installed at either white or yellow crosswalks. They are typically found on major streets with a high volume of traffic. They do not slow down traffic like the 15-mile-per-hour portable signs, so you need to make sure to make eye contact with drivers as you are getting ready to cross children. No matter what type of crosswalk or traffic control device you have at your location, protecting student safety as they cross the street will be the one part of your job that will never change. Thank you for all you do and for truly being guardians of the future.
on. That being our final chapter.
All right, so chapter 5, looking at different types of devices. The Hawk is the big one. You're starting to see a lot more of those, especially in Phoenix. I think we're up to 80. I can't even keep count. We're doing like one a week. So it's crazy. But, you know, they are an effective way to allow folks to cross the street 24 hours a day, let alone just for school hours. So they are effective in what they do. You have to use them the right way. You have to be pushing the button like you do at a signal. The drivers hopefully respond and stop when they see the solid red light. Then you're able to cross the street. You know, there's issues still with drivers not responding to the devices as quickly as they should. So you have to be aware of drivers. Brandon, you were going to say something about that?
Yeah, I have a hard time keeping track of the Hawks in Peoria too, because we've got 2 of them. So that's really difficult for me to keep track of. But I know there is one location that's at an elementary school in Peoria, and the crossing guard there many years ago said, drivers aren't stopping. I'm having a lot of problems. They're speeding through. And I came out and took a look and saw what was happening is that the crossing guard would press the button. It would go through the sequence that we're going to talk about a little bit more later. But once it went to the solid red, and as soon as the walk signal came up, she would walk right out into the street, and cars would be driving through, and she would, you know, yell at them and be upset. But the problem was, think of it like a traffic signal too. How many times have you been driving and you're in the middle of the intersection, it turns from yellow to red, and you're still clearing the intersection, you're still driving through, and legally you're allowed to do so. The same is true here. So just because it says walk, remember, it's not this magical barrier that stops everything from happening. You still need to make sure that cars are going to clear before you walk out there, and also make sure that people aren't choosing to run that red light, because that does happen sometimes. So sure. That would be the big thing to stress, is treat it like a signal, and just make sure that you're letting it clear out as necessary before you set foot, because protect yourself first. Then make it safe, make sure it's safe before you call the kids across. So protect yourself and protect the children, but yourself first, because you can't protect the children if you're not protecting yourself.
Correct. All right, so I guess that's it for chapter 5. Are we gonna move on to the next section of the training? Margaret?
Yeah, so what we're going to do right now is go through some scenarios to reinforce what was covered in the videos, and then talk a little bit more, the nuts and bolts about what you should do in certain situations, and then the specifics at different crossing scenarios. So Don and I will go back and forth and discuss different scenarios. If you do have questions, general questions that come up, please put them in the Q&A box. I'm a little concerned with this new format that maybe we aren't getting as many questions as we normally would, and we want to make sure this is interactive as much as possible. Even though we can't be in person, we want to still give you the same quality training. So please write those questions in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer those.
Okay, so we're going to start with the first demo is a 2-way stop with 1 guard. So you'll see our guard waiting on the other side of the school. The students will walk up and cross with him to join the students that were already at his corner. He goes out into the school zone and crosses the students until they get to the campus. That is what we would call an L crossing, because you're crossing in the shape of an L.
Okay. I think did you have any other comments before we move to the next scenario, or do we have any questions? I don't see any questions yet. Okay.
So, you know, it's all about the setup. As long as you are putting your portables in the right spot, that will help you operate the zone. And then when you're crossing, just being aware of your placement in the corner and following that proper L pattern, you should be able to cross your kids safely.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next scenario and make sure that the interaction is just as awkward as it is in person. So we're doing our best to not step on each other. So thank you for bearing with us. So this next scenario is very similar to the first. The only difference, the main difference, is it's at a four-way stop where you've got the white crosswalks and you don't have the yellow crosswalk at all. So in this setup, we've got the school on the upper right-hand corner. That's where our guard is waiting. In this scenario, let's assume that there's a lot of kids that come from some of the other corners too, and that's why the guard is chosen to be at this corner in the morning. The setup is in the morning. So we already have kids on the upper left-hand corner. So that guard is gonna head and cross those students first, and then return to the original corner, and then make a separate crossing, and of course, wait for traffic to clear, looking left, right, left before walking into the street. Cross the kids over to the corner across from the school, and finally one more crossing to get the kids back to the school property, and then the guard will return to the original corner. One thing I want to point out about this in this scenario, savvy crossing guards may say, well, why didn't that crossing guard just make two crossings? Just cross what would be that upper crosswalk and then cross the crosswalk on the left to get those kids across over and only make two crossings. And my response to that would be, well, in this particular scenario, only 3 of the crosswalks are painted. So that means the school and or city want those crosswalks to be used. However, it may be that was more appropriate many years ago, and maybe it's not today. So this is a great example of something that we would encourage you. If you see something out there, the signs markings, you think maybe it doesn't make sense for today, or you have a better idea, share that with your principal. Have your principal contact the appropriate city's transportation or traffic engineering group, and we can evaluate that. Because maybe that was done many years ago and it's just not appropriate today. Maybe it does make more sense for that other crosswalk to be marked instead of one of the others. Maybe not. It also depends on how many kids come from the other corners as well. So it's just something that would be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
And another point that I've noticed in this demo is the direction that the guard is facing. We get a lot of questions and comments about which direction should I be facing in the crosswalk. And a lot of times it just comes down to wherever you have the majority of traffic coming towards you, that's the direction you should be facing. So in this scenario, the guard felt that the traffic heading westbound was going to be heavier. So the guard in the demo faced in that direction. But if you feel that it's another direction, like if it's the opposite way, you would stand the opposite way. Later on in these demos, when we're talking about two guards, then you'll see how they work together facing the direction of traffic that's coming towards them.
And we do have a question.
Okay.
Barbara asks, when you have the L crossing, should we have the traffic wait for both streets or one at a time? And she says, both kids and cars are anxious, so just to make the kids not jaywalk, I treat it as two separate. So can
it should be two separate, because you don't want to delay cars any more than you have to. So it's easier just for traffic flow and for safety and for, the agitation level that drivers get to, is to allow it to be two crossings.
Yeah, and the worst case scenario I've seen before, I think you've probably seen this before, is where a crossing guard walks out into the middle of a four-way stop intersection and holds everything up and stops everything for kids to cross. And we don't want you to do that. It's just one crosswalk at a time.
No.
We have another question that's come in from Andrea. or Andrea, when the crosswalk area was decided by a city, was there a process put into place? I'll start by answering this saying depends. It depends on your city and it depends when. So generally speaking, there was typically some thought that went involved in where those crosswalks were marked. However, it depends on the city, it depends on the location and how long they've been there. So the history could be lost to the sands of time, but then again, both Don and I have been in our positions for many, many years. So we may have the history, may or may not be true at other cities. So the best guess would be just assume there was some thought that went into it, even if we don't know. But if you do have a question, just contact your principal and ask them if you know they share your concerns and if they want it to be evaluated by the city you're in.
Yeah, and when you are dealing with a four-way intersection like we're looking at now, crosswalks are typically installed along with the stop signs. So, you know, it could have just been installed as just a feature to go along with the stop signs. But a lot of times, crossing can change over the years. So right now we've got these 3 crosswalks painted. Maybe it flips around and it's the other side that needs to be painted instead. So you never know. Always, if you see things, contact your administrator, have them contact the city that you're in, and they can evaluate and see if any changes need to happen for those locations.
Okay.
All right, let's go on to the next one, Margaret. So this is a demo of a 2-way stop with 2 guards. So you see our 2 guards are on the opposite corners from each other. They're going to work separately first. So they're going to go out into separate white crosswalks, cross their whole groups of kids from those corners. Then they're going to come together in the final crossing and cross that last group and stop the traffic in the direction that they're facing. So that's the benefit of having guards, 2 guards work together in the same crosswalk, is you can work on just your half of the roadway. It's not always like that when you're a single guard. Do you have something to add to that, Brandon?
No, there's some points that they'll make for the next scenario with the all-way stop that are appropriate for this one as well.
Okay.
Although I will bring it up because this is an example with the yellow crosswalk. We have a question from Estrella, and the question is, our school signs are hit by traffic almost daily and we need to get new ones. It takes between 2 to 3 weeks to get them replaced. Why does it take so long? And I guess that also comes down to, once again, it depends on which city you're in.
Yes.
Most cities, it's up to the school or the school district to supply those portable signs. The
Right.
one exception is Phoenix, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so in Phoenix, you know, it doesn't take normally 2 to 3 weeks. We try to do maybe a 1 to 2 day turnaround because we know that it's vital that you have those signs, and it also doesn't allow police to do the enforcement properly if the signs aren't in place.
So the follow-up was that it's in Mesa. So
Yeah.
it does take time just to order the signs from whoever the sign vendor is. My best recommendation for that is if a district, especially a big district like Mesa, can have a few spares on hand, that can drastically reduce the wait times. In fact, certain locations, if you have portable signs that are getting hit all the time, you really want to have some spares on hand. That would be my recommendation. But it is up to the school to get those signs. But that's a recommendation I would suggest to help with that. And unfortunately, it's common at several locations where signs either get hit frequently or wander off from time to time. And I guess one point that we haven't made yet, I don't think we've really stressed it too much, is a good defense to protect those signs if they're chained up when not being used every day. A better defense is if you can remove them from the site and store them on the school campus somewhere. Obviously, it takes more work to do that, but your chance of those signs walking off is greatly reduced.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to put them behind the fence and lock them, you know, harder to get to.
Sure. Okay, can we move on to the next scenario, which is very similar. You'll see a pattern.
I'm sorry, Brandon, but did you have any, I see 2 or 1 right now in the Q&A. Was there a question regarding this scenario?
Yeah, well, there's another follow-up that just says, why can the signs be surrounded by the yellow metal around the rectangle so the cars that hit them will remember to be more careful? That's something, the signs that we use are actually standardized. There's a specific detail that says exactly what the sign's supposed to look like from the state, from Arizona Department of Transportation. But ultimately, sometimes it just comes down to if people hit, I mean, there's signs in the road, they do get hit. And if you're slowing down to 15 miles an hour already, you should be careful. So I don't really have a clean answer for that, but it's most likely not that people don't see the signs as much as maybe they're a little careless or just not so aware of their surroundings. So.
All right.
We're ready to move on?
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry, I was muted. Go ahead.
Okay, so the next scenario, we've got a 4-way stop with 2 crossing guards working in conjunction once again. So again, we've got three crosswalks painted, and there's a little something different in this one. So I'll point it out. So the guards work together in conjunction to get that one group of kids to cross and get over to school. Both guards return to their corners. So notice the guards are standing on the line of the crosswalk closest to approaching traffic. And then in this case, one guard has a group of kids, but the other doesn't. So only one guard goes out to stop traffic while the other one waits. And then to get that final group of kids back to school, the guards work in conjunction once again. So the thing I really want to point out about this is that in years past, we taught or stressed something a little bit different. We said that even if you don't have students to cross, both crossing guards would go out into the street at the same time. So we've had a lot of comments about that over the last, I think, 2 years. I would say several comments from crossing guards who said, you know, I was doing that exactly like you taught, and a police officer pulled over and said, don't do that. You're stopping traffic for no reason. You shouldn't be out there in the street if you're not crossing students. And the last thing we want to do is cause conflicts like that, where we put you as crossing guards in a difficult position where you're doing what we said, but you've got police officers telling you that maybe you should do something else. So we looked at it and said, you know, if you're really not crossing students, you're preventing vehicles from turning right and left that otherwise could turn without interrupting any crossings. So we decided to change our recommendations in this case and say, if you don't have crossings, just stay on your corner, but work together. And as far as working together, one thing I wanted to stress is in the video, there's a really uncomfortably long scene where I'm standing on the corner, kind of talking, laughing, pointing. And what was happening is Dawn and I were at an intersection very similar to this in Phoenix for the training, but we were acting as real crossing guards that morning, and it was a very busy crossing. And so what we were doing was actually coordinating with each other to figure out when we would both step out onto the street at the same time, because there was so much going on from every different direction. We were waiting for an appropriate gap, or in some cases we had to force a gap. So we wanted to make sure we were stepping out at the exact same time, so we're giving a clear indication to the motorists what we were going to be doing. And even before we stepped foot out into the street, we could raise our stop paddles to alert people, hey, we're gonna be walking out into the street. So that's really important that you work together closely with when you do have 2 guards at a location, so you don't have one walking out and then the other staggering behind. So communication is very important, and it's a lot to keep track of, even at some of these locations with 2 guards. But it's really important that you do coordinate in that way. Did you have anything to add to this, Dawn?
There's a couple of districts in Phoenix that require their two guards to go out at the same time. Like you were talking about, one not going out when they don't have traffic. So if that's the situation in your district, if you want to let your administration know that the training advised you to only have one of you go out on the road, and you want to talk to me about it, just contact me, let me know, and I'll talk to them and talk to the district.
Yeah, and I'd be willing to bet that that's the district's practice, because that has been the actual recommendation from this training. So
Right.
to know our actual recommendation has changed, that very well may have an effect on what the district does moving forward too.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
I think we're ready for the next one.
Okay, so now we are onto the demo with a signalized intersection with two crossing guards. So you see our guards, one's on the school side, one's across. They come out into the road together, facing their direction of traffic. Once it's clear, the kids slowly go into the roadway. There's a couple things about what happens with two guards at a signal. The second guard stops the turning. You saw that the car was waiting to turn left. That second guard controls and stops that. If that second guard wasn't there and that half of the road was clear, that driver could legally make that turn. So that's where the second guard is invaluable. And unfortunately, some districts don't feel the second guard is that important. If you feel you have issues at your school where you're the only guard at the signal and a second guard would be really helpful, let your administration know. And then hopefully they'll reach out to me or whoever, whatever city it is, and the transportation folks can work with them and try to show the importance of what a second guard can do.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack for this scenario at a traffic signal. There's just so many things going on, and we really realized that when we were doing the training videos. One of the other examples I wanted to give is has to do with that left turning vehicle, because we do have a lot of conflicts reported, and I've seen them over the years too. And even when I've kind of trained crossing guards, serving as a crossing guard at a signalized location, where the left turners want to turn while you're out there. The problem is when they can turn left, they can only turn left on a green light. But when they have a green light, it's also the walk signal for you to cross the street. So something that you can do, depending on how many kids you have waiting at your corner, is you can press that push button and just tell the kids, we're going to wait a cycle. We're going to wait for it to go through. That way it lets some of those cars flush out and gives them a little bit of relief. So that's one thing that you can do at your discretion that can help relieve some of the pressure. And sometimes just letting one group of cars go for one cycle can make a huge difference, and people will be more willing to be a little more patient. And another part I want to see, if we can play this scenario one more time. I want to highlight that left turner and what happens with the crossing guard that walks back to the street. So you can advance the crossing guard on the lower half, closer to where the kids are right now. You're going to see that crossing guard get out of the street before the kids are out of the street, and then the car realistically would turn before the kids are completely out of the street. So what we're stressing there is two things. One, we know that you have limited time to get into and out of the street at a traffic signal. But the second part has to do with the law regarding white crosswalks that we're going to cover in the very next section. But as Dawn said, as long as one half of the crosswalk is clear of humans, of bodies, the car can actually make the turn. So that's, in a way, you're getting back to your corner just to get out of the street, but you're also letting those left turners, they have to make that left turn movement sometime. So by you getting out of the street, once the kids are out of your half of the crosswalk, that also takes a little pressure off and lets maybe a couple more cars make that turn. And often these are a lot of times there are even parents that are trying to make that turn. So that's one more thing that you can do to get yourself out of the street and to relieve some of the traffic pressure at the intersection.
All right, I guess we're ready for the next one.
So in this scenario, we've got a flashing beacon with 2 guards. One point of distinction is that a flashing beacon does not make cars do anything. It's not like the Hawk, or it's not like a traffic signal where you have a red light that says you have to stop. All it does is alert motorists that you are in the crossing area, and very often they have a pedestrian push or a push button. So in order to use, again, cross exactly as you would with a normal crossing. If you have 2 guards, coordinate together, because usually as soon as you press that button, it starts flashing. So only press that button when you're ready to walk out into the street or just before you do. And again, remember, you can raise your stop paddle before you set foot out of the street, make eye contact with motorists. You can press that button and work in conjunction. If you're still out there crossing kids when the lights start flashing, that's okay. Again, it's just something to alert motorists that you're there, usually to catch their attention to stop initially. But if you feel like it's really too short a time, once again, you can contact your principal to reach out to the city to see if maybe that can be evaluated. I just learned this morning that we installed a couple of these flashing beacons in Peoria, that we had a default setting of 20 seconds. So we didn't realize how long they were flashing. And some locations that may be too long, some locations that may be too short. So again, if you feel like it's not enough time, let your principal know and they can reach out to us as appropriate to evaluate if it's still appropriate. But the main takeaway here is crossing with a flashing beacon, for all intent and purpose, it works exactly like a crosswalk without a flashing beacon. It's just that little extra notification you have at it. Did you have anything else to add for this one, Don?
Yeah, in Phoenix, we're down to 2 locations for schools that have these flashing devices. The one is at a 15-mile-an-hour zone for an elementary. So, you know, you operate those exactly the way you would. It would just be in addition to what you're already doing at the 15-mile-an-hour zone. So you would hit the flashers before you go into the roadway. The other location is at a high school. So the school tries to encourage the students to hit the buttons, but, you know, with high schoolers, you can't get them to do much anything. So, you know, hopefully the safe ones hit the button and get the flashers going.
So the distinction here is this is a flashing beacon as opposed to a Hawk or pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is a little bit more complex and is much closer to a traffic signal. So Don is going to step us through the sequence of a Hawk and what a motorist sees, at the same time what you as the crossing guard or a pedestrian would see.
You ready, Don?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
So as a pedestrian, when you're waiting, you'll see the push button. You'll have the "Don't Walk" sign, and the drivers, the head will be black as they're approaching. Then when it comes to when it's activated, the yellow light will be seen by the drivers, and you still have to wait as a pedestrian. And you continue to wait as the yellow light goes from flashing to solid. They're going to start slowing down. And then when it comes to a solid red for the drivers, that's when it's safe for pedestrians and the crossing guards to go out into the roadway. And you're going to get the walk signal that will let you know that it's safe to walk. You're going to continue crossing even as the red solid turns to flashing, and it'll count down and it'll tell you when you need to get out of the roadway. And then as the red lights go away, the drivers will see the heads turn back to black, and hopefully you guys are safely across the street.
So
Any thoughts about that, Brandon?
yeah, so one thing I just wanted to stress again, I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. When the walk signal comes up, remember, treat it very similar to a traffic signal. You still want to make sure traffic has stopped for you before you walk out there. You establish as a crossing guard that it's safe to cross, and then call the kids to cross once you've determined it's safe for them to do so. If you feel like you don't have enough time to do that, if it already is doing the countdown by the time you're waving the kids across, once again, reach out to your principal to see if they can contact the city, whichever city is appropriate, to see if it's possible to give a little bit more of that solid walk time before the flashing don't walk. A lot of times you probably have enough of the flashing don't walk time because that's calculated based on a fairly slow walking speed, but it's usually that time to get established out into the crosswalk to determine everything is safe and then to call the kids across that you need a little bit of extra time, that you more than you would at a normal traffic signal that assumes a pedestrian sees walk and just goes immediately, because you're using up a lot more time. So that's what's different about a school crossing or crossing, a signal crossing or a hawk crossing with a guard, as opposed to just a crossing anywhere else that the general public is using, because there's an extra time to set up that's needed at those locations sometimes.
And the other issue too at these locations is drivers don't always stop the way they're supposed to. So you can't just immediately go out into the road when you see the walk signal pop up.
Right.
You as a guard have to make sure that it's clear before you try to go out, and that may take a few seconds, and that may interrupt the time you need to get the kids across the street. So if you're finding that that's a common occurrence, you may need to get a little bit more time added just to make up for that.
So we have a question that's come in. Fred asks, can all cities have these type of signs? So I guess the clarification would be signs, or are you talking about the hawk, the pedestrian beacon? The question is for beacon. Go ahead, Don.
All cities could have them. It's just up to the jurisdiction to decide if they want to install them.
Yeah, and there's also criteria that need to be evaluated, but minimum criteria before a city should even consider this type of a treatment. Typically, they are more appropriate on higher speed, higher volume locations where you don't have the benefit of other forms of traffic control, primarily a traffic signal. But there is a lot involved with it. They are expensive, and there's a certain minimum number of crossings that there should be before a city should be considering them. If you have a location where, if you've got 200 crossings, that's kind of a higher priority location. But again, it depends on a case-by-case basis. So if you feel there's a location where you have a lot of crossings and you're having difficulty at that location, particularly on higher speed arterial streets, you could request your principal to contact the city if it could be evaluated. There's a lot involved, but at least to get that process started to look at it. And one thing I would encourage is maybe if you have concerns, to bring up the concerns rather than what the solution is, because sometimes maybe a hawk is appropriate, maybe it's not. There's actually a guide out there that's produced by the Federal Highway Administration, and there's a specific guide that pertains to Arizona that is almost a kind of a checklist of different ideas, things that cities can do to improve safety and visibility at crosswalks. And it depends on what the safety concerns are. So the one thing, so I'd say I would just encourage to bring up your concerns rather than the solutions, and see if your principal shares those concerns, and maybe the city you're working in, if they can look at some options and see if anything additional might be appropriate at your crossing. Did you have anything to add to that one, Don?
No, you covered it pretty good. So I think we're done with this section. think we're going to move on.
All right. So now I'd like to introduce to you Officer Stephen Petrie from the City of Phoenix, and he's going to walk us through some laws regarding, or the traffic laws regarding crosswalks.
All right, good morning, everybody. So I'd like to discuss, we're going to talk about some of the traffic laws considering the crosswalk in the school zones. So just real briefly, we'll talk about the crosswalks as defined in 28-792. We do have unmarked and marked white crosswalks. Pedestrians must yield to vehicles before entering the roadway. And likewise, once the pedestrians are in the roadway or in that crosswalk or unmarked crosswalk, the vehicles must yield to the pedestrians in the crosswalk only on their half of the roadway. And then motorists may not pass a vehicle stopped at a crosswalk. So if any vehicles are stopped for the pedestrians in the crosswalk, those vehicles cannot pass a vehicle. So on to the next one for the school zone crossings. Now this is a little bit different. We were just talking about the white crosswalks. Now for school zones, we do have yellow crosswalks with portable signs that read no passing, 15 miles an hour, fines double, schools in session. And then we have at the crosswalk, stop when children in crosswalk. Now, the motorist must stop for all pedestrians, not just children, but any pedestrians that are inside that yellow crosswalk when these signs are posted out into the roadway. 15 mile an hour speed limit applies when portable signs are in the street. So that's important that these signs have to be out on the street to designate it as a school zone, and the vehicles must be going 15 miles an hour once they get into that school zone. And then treated as a standard crosswalk when portable signs are not in the street. For the next slide. Now, every school will have an operating agreement that allows the school to put the portable signs out into the roadway. And now I can stress this enough, but when you guys are putting the signs out, again, I think Don and Brandon were talking about, you guys need to be careful when you guys are walking out into the street, putting the signs out, but please put the signs out where they're designated to go. They should have yellow dots in the roadway where these signs should be placed. Please don't put the signs any other place except on the yellow dots. You don't want to make the school zones any longer than they should be or any shorter than they should be. So just please put them on the dots that are provided in the roadway for the signs. And then for the school zone or for the stop when children in crosswalk, you'll put those at the crosswalk too, and there should be little dots where those signs should go. It's going to give times for the portable signs are in the street, and then it's going to state if crossing guard is going to be at that particular crosswalk or not. So for the next slide, 15 mile an hour signs. I got something blocking my view here for the. So school zones are 15 miles an hour. Now school zones at 15 miles an hour, cars are supposed to be, as soon as they get to that first 15 mile an hour sign, they are supposed to be at 15 miles an hour coming into that school zone. They're not supposed to be slowing the 15 mile an hour when they get into that school zone into the crosswalk. They already need to be at 15 miles an hour when they get to that 15 mile an hour sign. We do have what we like to say a zero tolerance for the school zone. So technically a car can be cited for 16. We will give a little leeway with the officers here. Usually it'll be about 18 or 19 miles an hour. Usually that somebody will start getting a ticket for their speed in a school zone. But again, remember the signs have to be out on the roadway for us to do any kind of enforcement. They have to be properly marked and properly out into the roadway for us to do and properly enforce the school zones. So the next slide is passing. Unless otherwise directed by traffic or police, subject to exemptions granted, the driver of an authorized emergency vehicle in this chapter, the driver of the vehicle should obey the instructions and official traffic control device applicable to the driver that is placed in accordance with this chapter. Passing when one vehicle overtakes the front of another vehicle. So when these signs, when these portable signs are out into the roadway and you are inside the school zone, there is no if you have 2 lanes, there is no passing at all. So if you do have a vehicle, say he's doing 10 miles an hour while he's in that school zone, the other vehicle cannot pass that vehicle. We understand that it says 15 miles an hour, but if that vehicle is going 10 miles an hour, nobody can pass that vehicle. Now the school zone, I don't know if we talked about this, but the school zone is from the first 15 mile an hour sign and it goes to the crosswalk. Now, once they get through that crosswalk, they can resume the speed of the roadway. So the school zone is from that first sign until they get to the crosswalk and out of that crosswalk. Myths of jaywalking for the next slide here is pedestrian crossing a roadway at any point other than within a marked crosswalk or with an unmarked crosswalk in an intersection shall yield the right of way to vehicles on the roadway. Pedestrian crossing a roadway at a point where a pedestrian tunnel or overhead bridge crossing has been provided and they're not using that particular crossing, they have to yield to the vehicles on the roadway. And for C, it says between adjacent intersections at traffic control signals or in operation, pedestrians shall not cross at any place except in a marked crosswalk. That's where I like to use the downtown area where we have 2 signalized intersections within close proximity of each other. So like say we have Central Avenue and First Avenue there on Washington. So we have 2 signalized intersections there. They are supposed to use the signalized intersections either at Central or on First Avenue to cross Washington. They can't cross mid-block. So that's typically the definition of jaywalking for us. Just in when you guys, well, let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry. So fines double.
Sorry about that. I can go back.
No, that's all right. Go ahead. We'll
Okay.
go to the fines double. I think I'm just getting a little ahead of myself. Sorry. So fines double in each jurisdiction can be anywhere to almost $1,000. So that's going to be up to what the fines are for each jurisdiction. In the city of Phoenix, it's about $250 for a school zone violation. But again, that can double if the court or the judge feels like it, they can double that fine. No passing, 15 mile an hour porter signs must say fines double for the double fines to apply. At least I know for the city of Phoenix, all of our signs for schools do say fines double. So crossing guards are not police officers. So please do not direct traffic. You're there just for the safety of the kids, just to get them across the street. So please don't direct traffic. I know you guys might try to get school buses in and out of parking lots or traffic out of the parking lot. Please don't do that. You guys are just there to get the kids across the street in the school zones. So also on that note, just when you guys are crossing these kids in the school zones, I think that Don had talked about it earlier, just try to, hopefully there's a natural break that you guys can get out into the crosswalk to cross the kids. Just don't jump into the street expecting the vehicles to stop automatically. So just be careful when you guys are walking out in the street, get the vehicles stopped. Don't enforce the law. Don't wave vehicles through the crosswalk. That could be very confusing. So if you're trying to help traffic and everything like that, if you guys are in the roadway in that school crosswalk with your signs, nobody should be coming through that crosswalk. They have to stop. So please don't wave anybody through. Stop vehicles to allow other cars or buses to make turns. Stand in the roadway. Just don't stand in the roadway unless you're crossing the kids from the side of the street. And again, force vehicles stop to abruptly. Just try to be courteous to the other vehicles. Or the vehicles crossing that, you just want to do it safely when you guys are going out into the crosswalk trying to stop those cross the kids. So the next slide, violations of the law. Okay, there we go. So crossing guards must focus on crossing students, keeping them safe. Again, you guys are there for the students to get them across the roadway. You're not there to direct traffic or anything like that. You're just there to get the kids to and from one side of the road to the other. So just be careful. I know you guys have chronic violators, I guess you could say, in your school zones. You can't get the license plate. If you get one, there's really a whole lot we can do with that, because we as officers, we have to see the violation for a particular person to get a ticket. If you see the officer there, you might be able to tell him there is a chronic vehicle or a couple of vehicles. You can probably try to give him the description of the vehicle. Maybe we'll get lucky and get him that time that we're there. Nothing makes me more happier than getting somebody that's a chronic speeder through a school zone. So you might be able to give that officer that information when you get there. And then we do here for the city of Phoenix, we do have a speed hotline, 534 speed, that you can give request for traffic enforcement at a school zone. Just be mindful. We have so many schools here in the city of Phoenix and only a handful of motor officers that try to do the enforcement. So you might see us a day or two at your school zone, but then we'll have to go to another school zone. But we'll try to get back to your school zone if we can, but be mindful that we do have a lot of schools to try to do enforcement on. And then quick review over this. And let me see. I have another, I'm looking at something else. I'm sorry. I got just a review of white crosswalks. We have white crosswalks here. We have yellow crosswalks with the portable signs in the street. And then just be mindful that the signs out in the roadway for your school zones, please be mindful of putting them out where they are properly, so we can do the enforcement out there. Because if they're not marked properly or the signs are incorrectly put out, we can't do any enforcement out there until they're properly posted. So any questions that we see?
Yes, Officer Peach, Petrie, we do have a couple of questions. I'm tongue-tied
Okay.
this morning. First question that came in is from Robert. He asks, or he says, I find most people pass on the right side of the car in front of them. Is that allowed?
Passing as a vehicle that's turning left into a school zone or school parking lot, or I'm trying to maybe verify, but no, if they're inside a school zone, whether it's on the left side or the right side, if they're in between those signs, the 15-mile-an-hour sign up to the children in crosswalk, there's supposed to be no passing whatsoever technically within that school zone, if that makes it clear.
Okay, so I just asked Robert if he could verify if that does answer his question. No passing in a school zone, or I guess I'll just expand on that a little bit. Just passing in general. If a vehicle, maybe he's asking in general, if a vehicle is in what we would commonly call the fast lane, if there's 2 lanes and someone passes on the right side, in that scenario, is that illegal? So that would be independent of crossing, I guess.
Yeah, if I'm understanding if I'm understanding it correctly, if you're inside that school zone, once you're past that 15-mile-an-hour sign, up to that crosswalk, there is not allowed to be no passing whatsoever.
Another question we have is, if I have a bus coming to school, I do not cross the kids until after the bus passes, as they are on time schedules. I do not make the buses wait. Is this okay?
Yeah, that's fine. We just don't want you, like you said, try to be courteous of the traffic. If you have a lot of traffic, maybe let that traffic go for a minute or two and let the kids wait on that side of the street. If it's real busy, you see like 3 or 4 buses coming, yeah, if you can, get the buses inside the parking lot. But what we're asking you is don't go into the roadway to stop traffic just so those buses can make turns or vehicles can come out. You're just there for the safety of the kids.
That's a great point. I have seen that before, where crossing guards will stop and sometimes even wave buses out.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, that that is beyond their scope as a crossing guard. So
correct.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Another question. I'll go ahead and answer it very quickly, but the question is about what that number was for City of Phoenix, and you said 602-534 speed, or what is it, 7733? Is that what it is?
I'd have to look at it.
I think it was. I think it is. But
yeah.
it's 534 SPE.
Correct.
No D
SPE.
needed, but SPE.
Yes. Correct.
But we do also have a resource available that has the transportation or traffic engineering contact numbers, as well as the appropriate police department or sheriff's department for each city. And that's one of the handouts that we have available. And I think that's something that that is available on the Maricopa Association of Government's website. And I'm pretty sure we have a link to that we are going to put up in the chat box in just a minute here. That's something we can get. Another question, and so that addresses the question of how can we find out for our city what the 534 number is. So that is whatever the police department is, and we have those contacts that we're going to be providing. Or actually, I think either Margaret or Mohammed is putting it up on the screen right now under Maricopa Association of Governments Safety Program. It's coming up now. And as they're pulling that up, there's another question that says, I have a frequent speeder that after half a school year, I was able to get her license plate number. I am considered City of Phoenix, but we have a sheriff department. Our sheriff office is able to do an educational visit. I think that's a question, is if the sheriff's department can do an educational visit.
They can, I guess, if they have the manpower kind of thing. And we have done that before. If we do get a license plate, we can make contact. Hey, you have your license plate. We've heard that you're speeding through the school zone. Can you just be mindful of your speed while you're in the school zones? Yes. So that is something that's a possibility if they have the time to do that. Correct.
Okay, perfect. I think we've answered all the questions that are up on the list right now. And Margaret, I know we're pretty much right at 11 o'clock, right? 11 o'clock now. I don't know if you wanted to
Right.
jump in, but we were going to be available to keep answering questions if there were still some more questions. But I'll turn it back over to Margaret.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't muted. I went ahead and I pulled up the web page. As you saw, I entered http://srts.azmag.gov, and it brought me to this web page here. And when you go down, you'll see a heading for the crossing guard training workshops. Underneath there, you have several different links. And again, this may look a little bit different in the next week or so, because we're going to be updating this web page with the recording of this session itself. But I did want to show you, to Brandon's point, that we have the handbook in both English and Spanish on this web page. And the list that he was referring to with the contact information is on the second page of that worksheet right here, or that handbook. So you see here we have all the MAG the local agencies, and it will have both a police hotline as well as an engineering hotline. So if we zoom in here to City of Peoria, you'll see there's a number there for police and as well as a number there for engineering. So that's what he was referring to there. All right, and with that, again, I want to thank you all for attending. I'm going to ask, I just kind of wanted to reiterate, we're going to be posting an email address that you need to send your sign into here in a few seconds, but I just wanted to make sure to make clear the 4 items that you need to provide us in that email. It's really important. Without any, one of those pieces of information, we would not be able to convey to your district that you attended. So it's really important that you provide your first and last name, the school district, as well as the city or town that the school resides in. And all of that needs to be sent with a subject line that just simply says CG sign in. So if I could have either Mohammed or Chris go ahead and post that email address for the guards into the chat, that would be great. So the Crossing Guard events email address is what you'll be sending in your email to for your sign in, or what we're calling a virtual sign in this year. So that will help us track it. It looks like there was one more in the Q&A, Brandon. Is that something that we want to go ahead and address at this time?
Yeah, I just popped it back in there from dismissed. It was a question about other cities' 534 numbers. So that would be, the reference would be the police and or traffic engineering and transportation department contact numbers for each city. That's the reference you just showed. So I'm just typing a quick response to that one, but it wasn't a new question that came in. And as we're waiting for any other questions, one thing I just wanted to share is a lot of us have been working on this training for many years now, and I do miss seeing a lot of familiar faces and seeing the new faces as well, and getting to have those interactions and those personal contacts. But understandably, these are different times we're living in, and we don't want to sacrifice the quality of the training. So if you do have questions, please don't be shy. Send them in now, or send them in through the contact information. Also, we really appreciate your feedback. So if you do respond to that questionnaire and give us any additional feedback, we'd really appreciate it. This is the first time we've done this format, obviously. Hopefully we'll get better if we continue to do this format in the future, but that's one of the questions that we're going to be asking is, what did you think of this format? Was it more convenient for you? Was it just as valuable? We'd really appreciate your feedback.
Okay, and then we have a poll. Before you leave the site, if you could, Craig, if you can just direct me, if I just press the polls. How do I administer the poll?
Okay, so if you go ahead and click on polls, Margaret, you should see the polling questions show up. And then at the bottom, you should see a blue button that says launch polling.
Okay.
And then go ahead and click that.
Okay. So if you could go ahead and view and address the questions. And just in case you missed it, there's a poll up for you to review and address at this time. I'll keep it open. Oh, good. Looks like we're getting some responses here.
Yeah, I believe the responses show up after the final question's been answered.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So you'll see them in real time once all 7 questions have been answered.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. We don't normally get to find this out until later. See, we see that I see numbers kind of going up and down right now. So we actually potentially get to share these, we get to share the results with all the attendees. So you can see how what everyone else had to say.
There's no Eric Anderson questions in here. No left.
Something that's standing out right now. Question number 4, was the Zoom web setting a good substitute to the traditional in-person workshop? So far, and it's still bouncing around, but it's well over 90% saying yes. For me, just the convenience, because normally we have 3 different workshops at different locations, and there's hours and hours of preparation and travel time. And, from my perspective, it was convenient. The question is, can we give you this also? Can we give you the same quality of training? And that's what we're hoping to do. So we're additional feedback and specific things you can tell us. That's all appreciated as always, but I think now more than ever, because it's obviously a completely different format for us.
So there's somebody here that says they can't find the poll. Should it be up on their screen just as it is for me, Craig?
Yes, it should have just popped up.
One thing I'm seeing, and I know we've gotten our results back already, question number 3, I see a little typo in there. I believe it's supposed to L pattern, U pattern. Oh, nope, that is correct. It is single crossing. Never mind. I thought it was supposed to be signal crossing. That is supposed to be single crossing. So we have a lot of people with the L pattern. Fortunately, not too many people with the U pattern, because it's a lot to keep track of, especially for one person. But there are some locations where it's needed. It looks like we have a few more questions that have come in. So let me take a quick look here. There is a request for hard copies of the handbook. Margaret, can you address that?
Sure. So at this time, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, even MAG staff have been teleworking since March 13th. I would need I would need to get authorization to even go to the office to obtain a hard copy. So I can certainly do that, but it may take a little while. I would need to kind of coordinate that. It's not something that I could do right away, but I would definitely, if you shoot an email to that email address regarding a hard copy, we can get that coordinated. I just want to let you know that it might take a little bit longer than it normally would, since we are not physically in our office to do that.
But one thing I would encourage is, if you actually go to the MAG website and click around, you'll see there's tons of resources there, including the videos, the handouts, additional information on the Safe Routes to School program. There's a lot of cool stuff there. So you may want to go there just to click around and see what you see there. I think there's a lot of value in seeing what's on that MAG website for folks.
So it looks like somebody's having difficulty submitting the poll.
And also, if there's one more place, some bold place we could put the email address for folks. I see a couple of questions. A few people asked, you know, so they don't see the email address to submit the attendance.
Mohammed or Chris, can you post that again real quick?
Yeah, I'll post that email again. And also the information that they need is just their name and the school district, correct?
Yeah, I had input that again. I don't know if I have the ability to cut and paste that, but it's right.
Yeah, actually, if we can refer folks to question number 6 on the poll, do they lose the poll once they submit it? Because it's showing up right there as it's crossing guard training at azmag.gov.
No.
No? Oh, sorry. Never mind. One more thing I can say is I'm looking at the results from the poll coming in. I was talking earlier about if this was a decent substitute. We're at 90% said yes, only 10% said no for preferring this even in the future. So I think that's very interesting. About 90% said this was a good substitute, and about 90% said, yeah, we'd like this format in the future. However, we're still on, we still have a few more minutes to answer questions. So a small percentage of people said their questions weren't answered yet. So you can certainly email those questions or post them in the Q&A box. And if we can answer those, we can try to do that right now too. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Our number of participants are trickling away, which is certainly okay. We're past 11 o'clock now, but we are here for a few more minutes to answer any questions. You have us.
We're getting some nice feedback in the chat as well. I think since we've all kind of been locked up since March, I think people appreciate being able to come together even online.
Oh, yes. This has become the new norm.
Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of wait until we get those numbers coming close together of number out of amount that are in attendance at the time. So I don't want to cut anybody off from providing their input, so I'm just going to leave it for right now.
Yeah, I see 63% of the participants have voted. Unfortunately, we can't shake you guys down at the door like we normally do, but we do appreciate as much feedback as possible. We really want to improve this, and like I said, now more than ever, since this is our first time with this new format. So I think just 2 months ago, we weren't even planning, was it 2 months? Maybe it's 3 months ago. We weren't even imagining this type of format for the training. So we had to adapt fairly quickly and come up with something when we realized, you know, conditions aren't going to be back to what we thought, you know, back to normal. So we had to do something else. We're up to 68% voting. Oh, it's a percentage based on the current number of participants.
Right, that's why I'm looking at the 53 of 76 instead of the percent.
Yeah. Well, while we're waiting for more votes to come in, Dawn, can you think of any other, is there anything else that we can think of? Maybe that we, oh, wait, question just came in. Marlene Garcia says, I attended your training as I have for the last 6 years. We were not able to get in a raffle this time for that much needed hat. I won every year, but it don't seem to win. Best of luck in all crossing guards throughout the city of Phoenix. And remember, what we do is an important part of the school year. We provide the safety to all the kids, stay safe. And you know, that's a good, we're in a different format. We kind of didn't have our send off, our thank you, but that's a great point is we really do appreciate everything you guys do. We want you to stay safe so you can keep the kids safe. Stay hydrated. Make sure you're wearing the loose fitting clothes, protect yourself from the sun, make sure the kids are safe, make sure you're keeping yourself safe. And you know, what you're doing is vital, it's really important. And even though at this point, we're not exactly sure when you'll be out there again, when you do get out there, we definitely want you to be prepared and ready to do your job. So we really appreciate you joining us for the training today. We know from acting as crossing guards for training and for the videos that it's not as easy as it looks. People think you just go out there, there's a stop paddle, what's the big deal? And any of you who've done it know already, it's much more than that. All of you who are rookies this year, it's gonna be your first year. We really hope you can take away a lot from this training and just keep yourself aware. Don't let your guard down, don't get lax. But the more that you can do to make yourself visible, the better. I know there was one crossing guard years ago at Phoenix who used to wave at every single person that drove by. And first I thought, oh, that's a really friendly crossing guard. And then after a while I realized, oh, that's a smart crossing guard, because drivers were trained to always look for that guard. So when she set foot out into the street, cars stopped for her. So it's kind of a, you know, it's good to be friendly, but it also had that added benefit of making that guard much more visible and making that guard not just a person in the background, but actually an individual. So I suspect that, you know, drivers probably were looking out for that guard more, because it just wasn't a, you know, a body in a vest. It was, that's a friendly person that we know. This is an individual. And so I think that was a huge benefit to that particular crossing guard. There's another question that has come in. It says, how do you get the hats? So we can't refer a specific vendor, but if you just do a Google search, Bright Ranger hats, you will see the hats pop up in your search. So there's a number of vendors you can get them from. I think they range from around $13 to $23, somewhere around there. I could be mistaken. They're not incredibly expensive. So you may try to convince your principal and let them know how vitally important you are and see if they're willing to get you a hat. But yeah, just do a Google search for Bright Reflective Ranger hats and it'll come up. We had another comment about appreciating the web format. Typically we have some sort of disaster that happens at every training where the AC goes out or there's some little fiasco. It's been uncanny over the years, and those of you that have been attending for a long time, if you've been unfortunate to attend whichever of our 3 crossing guard trainings was cursed that year, we've had audio problems. We've had problems with partitions being stuck down so we could only use half of the room. And we've pretty much been free of complications through this Zoom format. So that's a good thing. And each and every one of you were in the comfort of your own home. So I don't think it gets much better than that. But for those of you who don't know, and I think most of you didn't, every year one of the trainings had some unanticipated fiasco that we've had to kind of roll with the punches and figure out how to get around it. So we don't have that this year. In a very small way, I kind of miss it, but not really.
A lot of times it was Mesa too.
Well, a lot of times it's Mesa, but it's been Phoenix and it's been Peoria too.
Yeah, but we've all had our turn.
Mm-hmm. Judy White had a comment that you can get the hats on Amazon for a very low cost.
We got a raised hand.
There's a raised hand. If you can type something in the Q&A box, we'll address it. I have another comment from Estrella who says, I sent you an email. Let's see, where did it go? Someone must have addressed it. I was just starting to read it, and I think maybe it was addressed by Mohammed about email getting rejected. How do you sign in? Jerry Zuba asks, how do you sign in? I'm not quite sure.
The virtual sign-in is to send an email to the email address that we posted.
Gotcha.
And it needs to include your name, the first and last name, your school, your district, and the city or town that the school resides. And we have been getting emails already. So I'm not sure, it looked like one was what bounced back. That might be an issue on their servers, and because, as I mentioned, we are getting sign-in emails. So
another thing to double check would just be sure to that the email address is spelled correctly. Otherwise, that would probably cause a problem.
if that was Chris, you were muffled, sir.
Sorry about that. Hopefully you can hear me better now. Also double check the spelling of the email address, or your email will be bounced back as well.
That's true. Okay.
You know, one thing we weren't able to do this year, just because everyone's attending virtually, is we didn't get to ask how many guards, how long they had been working as a crossing guard. And that's a little part I missed too, to see how many people it's their first year, how many people have been there for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, some cases maybe even 15 or more. Margaret or Dawn, do you remember the most senior or veteran of all crossing guards we've ever seen? I definitely remember 23 years. I'm trying to remember if there was someone that was more than 23 years. There was one year where it was a really insanely high number of years, and we had 2 guards that were the same number of years. But that was a while ago. I thought we had 2 guards that had been working for, I want to say it was
I want to say 30.
years.
I want to say 30. I want to
Yeah.
say that they remembered like the very first crossing guard training that Phoenix had had done amazingly. So
The when AAA gave out the awards, that lady had been at least 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Who, the one that came and got the award and then she left.
Uh-huh. Well, and I know there are some guards that have been working for a long, long time. And like I said, you know, with this virtual format, that is obviously something we're missing. I actually miss, you know, I miss seeing some of the familiar faces and being able to chat with them, catch up with them from the previous year. But this is what it is, you know.
You know, Brandon, so you made me think of something. You know how we're doing the poll right now?
Yeah.
Maybe we do a beginning poll where we have questions that they can answer as we're getting set up.
That's a good idea.
And then, you know, come up with questions like how long have you been a crossing guard? You know, just different things about their experience.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
That could
Yeah.
offer additional information to us.
Yeah, give people something to do as they're setting up and as we're
Exactly.
getting set up and everything that can answer those questions. I think that would be great. If anyone has suggestions for questions that we could ask too, you could email them in as well.
It looks like Robert Torres says, I can't get onto the website to sign in. So just to clarify, the website and the sign in are two separate things. The sign in will not be included on the website. The sign in is an email that you send to that Crossing Guard events at azmag.gov. That's the sign in.
Thanks, Terry. Terry says, I had never had a poll pop up. I'm sorry, but everything was great and thank you. Well, at this point, it says we have 54 of the poll.
So we still have 59 participants.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Yeah. So unless there are any more questions that you want to enter into the Q&A, we are pretty much wrapped up with this event. And I, again, thank everybody for attending and being patient with us. And I hope to hear from you all again soon and just have a safe and very, very healthy year. Take care of yourselves.